Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's recovered from the Black Friday madness. It's lasted the whole weekend and even more, but you can all breathe now. It's all over. So welcome to our When Clicks Meet Bricks webinar. Over the past few years, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, the line between brick and mortar retail and e-commerce has been becoming increasingly blurred, with each side taking lessons from the other. Here at Looker, as an analytics company that is very heavily invested in the retail sector, we have the privilege at being at the center of this crossroads, at working with both sides of the retail sector and seeing how each side is learning from the other. And what we want to do for our webinar today is share with you stories of how our different customers in the retail sector are basically merging between the e-commerce and the brick and mortar sides of retail. I'm Caroline Gaspard. I am a retail specialist at Looker. I've been in retail consulting for about 6 years now, previously working at MasterCard Advisors.
Hi, I'm Bogdan Grigorescu. I'm responsible for the artificial intelligence platform at Marks & Spencer's.
Morning, everyone. Matt Cracknell, Enterprise Account Director at Looker for Retail, and I'll be doing the Q&A with you guys at the end.
Before we go forward with the actual content, just a bit of housekeeping for the webinar. So if you've ever been on a webinar before or even given one before, I'm sure you all know that the most silent or sometimes awkward part tends to be the Q&A. And we aim for that not to be the case here. So as the presentation goes on, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box that you'll see on the button below at the bottom of your screen. And then we'll be sure to address them either during the webinar by chat or, as Matt said, at the end of the session. This webinar will also be recorded and the slides will be shared. Our plan for today is just to give a brief introduction of Looker and then start diving into how the customers we work with in the retail space are driving forward the retail trends that the industry has observed over the past year and are predicted to shape the upcoming year. In particular, Bogdan from Marks & Spencer will be giving us a very interesting case study of how his company has used AI to improve their customer experience. A quick note on Looker. For those of you who haven't heard of us, we are an analytics company. There are many analytics companies out there, as I'm sure you know. We were founded with the philosophy that BI should not be a very expensive monolithic IT infrastructure. We were founded in 2012, around the time where databases started becoming increasingly powerful and much, much cheaper. And this really was the platform for our philosophy, whereby BI should just be a component that can easily fit into your existing tech infrastructure that is very user-friendly, rather than being a monolithic stack or just a desktop tool that is difficult to use and that can only be used by a handful of people. The philosophy of the Looker architecture is something that looks a bit like this diagram. And you'll see throughout this presentation how Looker's architecture helps retailers in the field really contribute to the emerging trends in retail. In summary, many retailers out there, whether you're an e-commerce startup or a FTSE 100 brick and mortar retailer with also an e-commerce arm, have many different data sources, from your marketing data to your ERP data to your customer support data. This data is often siloed. It's much easier to push this data to the entirety of your company if this data is on a unified platform in a single database. The idea isn't, of course, to have this data sort of in a proprietary tool, but rather in a database that any tool can access, with Looker being the layer in that. If you think of the people who consume data in your organization, from the C-suite to an analyst to the staff on the shop floor, they have different ways of consuming data, not all of which is logging onto a desktop tool or on a web portal and seeing the data. By having this unified platform, we can more easily push insights to whatever platform, whether it's their phone, an app that they're used to use, their email, that those users prefer. We've deployed this approach to over 1,600 customers across the globe with a very strong focus on retail, particularly in the UK and continental Europe. So just to name a few of our customers in Europe, we work with Marks & Spencer, Walmart and Asda, Superdry, River Island, and many other retailers, both on the, let's say, startup e-commerce side and on the more established brick and mortar side. These retailers with whom we work, we're very happy to say, are all contributing to the key and emerging retail trends that we've observed over the past year and over the next year. What we're actually going to do now is dive into the retail trends, not necessarily as seen by us, but even as seen by general retail research agencies, retail consultancies out there that are leading the industry. And we're going to talk a bit about how our retail customers are really driving those trends. And for today, we're going to focus on 4 key retail trends that have been observed in the market. The first one is using artificial intelligence for a customer experience analysis. As I'm sure you all know, AI has been one of the big buzzwords of 2018, and retail, as one of the industries that's fastest to pick up new technologies, has been at the forefront of that transformation, and the most successful ones have been putting the customer first when deploying AI within their organization. The second one is using data for hyper-personalization. So data in retail has been used for several years. There's nothing really new there. But most applications of data and analytics within the retail sector up until end of 2017 have been more focused on optimizing operations, whether marketing, operations, the shop floor, etc. Using data to hyper-personalize the customer experience while being conscious of consumer privacy, which has also been a very key trend of 2018, is really where the game started to change this year. The third trend is retail as a platform. While the 2 previous trends have existed before 2018 but have really accelerated throughout this year, and we project them to accelerate through 2019, retail as a platform is perhaps the newest trend that NRF has observed in retail. The idea being that the most successful retailers are starting to shift out of a purely B2C mindset and are starting to think in more of a B2B mindset. Retailers enjoy a very privileged relationship with the different companies they work with, whether they're distributors, they're suppliers, they're marketers, and the most successful retailers are starting to think about how they can monetize their data and their offering while always respecting consumer privacy, but to give that data back as a product to the companies they work with. The fourth trend we're going to talk about is data-driven supply chain optimization. Once again, there's nothing particularly new over the past year of data optimizing the supply chain, but what has shaped 2018 and 2019 in this regard is the speed at which data has been influencing decisions in the supply chain. Data is now being used to change the way the supply chain works on an hour-by-hour or even sometimes minute-by-minute basis. And this is something that we're going to give an example of today. Namely, we've handpicked a few of our select customers that have been leading these trends throughout the past year, and we expect to throughout the next year. And we're going to give a detailed story of each one of them, focusing, of course, on Marks & Spencer and how they're using AI to drive their customer experience. And on that, I will now hand over to Bogdan to talk a bit more about how Marks & Spencer has driven this first trend.
Hi, everyone. We've been going through a huge transformation in the Marks & Spencer and transforming the customer contact experience
around the call center as well as store contacts is a big part of that. So I'll be talking what that actually really means and very briefly what we actually achieved and how quickly. So to put it in context, stores in UK and Ireland and the contact center handled in the region of about 13 million, probably a little bit more calls per year. So that's quite a bit of traffic. Now, the infrastructure did not move with the time. And so we ended up having a legacy system in place, belonging to a different era, really. And so what does that mean is that the routing was not as efficient, no matter how much effort we put into it, was still not exactly what we want it to be. Insight-wise, it was sluggish, good for 10, maybe 20 years ago, but not for today. The customer engagement was not getting better, and the same goes for the customer satisfaction. So we need to do something about that. So our solution was to deploy a artificial intelligence platform around machine learning, natural language processing, coupled with intelligent routing. So really finding out accurately what is the reason for contact and deploy a conversational experience for the customer. So not an IVR, not at all an IVR, not a speech recognition IVR, nothing like that. All around conversational. We use Google Twilio and Looker to power all these platforms, so it's multi-cloud. And because it's machine learning, that's a lot of data to crunch. So we needed really powerful real-time analytics. So of course we had challenges, lots of them. The headline reads lack of real-time insight, and that really cuts it. That's what was the biggest challenge. We had very little insight into the calls to stores. It was not like it wasn't any, but everything was manual. To get that data and arrange it into a meaningful format and manipulating it and so on involved a lot of manual process, and that means a lot of errors as well. The reporting was not very accurate. It was definitely not cost effective because it was heavy on process, and the change was difficult to come by and slow. The customer experience was not great, and real-time reporting was basically non-existing. So lots of challenges. Now, how we evaluated the solution, we had a few considerations. Obviously, you'll recognize a few of them. They are pretty standard. Others are a little less than standard. So the main one, the first one we thought of is a solution to fit into our delivery model. We use a agile framework around lean/Kanban even, and a continuous delivery model, meaning that we want to be quick to react to change, and therefore we want to be in the position to roll out releases as on a conveyor belt. So speed and ease of onboarding of a solution and of the vendor was key. Of course, the features and the performance, that goes without saying. Product needs to be scalable, cost-effective. We need a very good and reliable, fast-reacting support. And last but not least, a very good, reliable account management, because we depend on so many cloud platforms. In case we have a problem, we need to be able to escalate effectively and very quickly. We also look overall at what the company approach, what the architecture they're using, and also we had recommendations from one of our trusted partners, key partners, Develop, that we're working on all sorts of development work for over a year and a half. And so they did recommend Looker. Okay, and in the end, how we end up using Looker? Well, of course, historical and near real-time customized reporting, but really is delivering insights. Insights around the reason for contacts, the intents of the people that are wanting to talk to M&S. We did tie in the machine learning, artificial intelligence data to the telephony data. We do use Looker to get accurate and timely insight into the optimization of the machine learning engine. This is continuous, by the way. It's not running cycle. It's continuous, day in, day out. We do look at trends. We do look at evaluating what's actually happening in different call flows, tying it up with, with peak periods, marketing, and all the other events, store openings and closures and things like that. So we have to optimize continuously. Trends analysis, it's another very big use case. Operational reporting, and last but not least, troubleshooting issues and call tracing. Troubleshooting issues not just as in day-to-day support, but also in deploying new features. It's a trial and error approach, test-driven development model, and so we have a fast turnaround on releases. So we need to be quick in resolving any bottlenecks. So for that, we need a lot of fast, accurate insight into what's the outcome of what we're doing. So this is just an example of one of our several dashboards that we're using. This is a daily near real-time report. In this case, it's sometime in October. This snapshot was taken sometime at the beginning of the day, near 70,000 calls to date. We present here the top 10 intents by use cases. And we could see in the bottom part, we could see a sort of a call-by-call tracing. So when was the call placed, to what store, what was the intent, and what was the outcome in the end, where we routed the call. There's a lot more information than that. So, for example, we do record all the utterances and we inform the customers of that, and there's real-time access to it, and so back and so forth. And also any details about the utterance of what was said, it's also accessible through Looker in near real time. We're looking at only a few seconds delay here. So that's what I was saying. It's modern reporting. It's 360 insight into what's happening. All these graphics can be changed. It's really rich. This is just the mostly used by a wide array of business stakeholders and IT stakeholders and so on. But we probably have in the region of 25, 30 different dashboards for different purposes. This is one of those underlying dashboards, just to illustrate. So in the end, what we achieved? Well, a 70% increase in call routing accuracy. That's actually a little bit conservative. My estimation are a little bit higher than that, but we stick to the lower figure. 95% customer engagement rate, which was significantly higher than before when it was hovering around 65-70% at best. We do have accurate insight into the customer journey. We do have accurate insight into how the platform performs at any given time. We have a very effective alert mechanism that's also simple and therefore simple to manage, easy to change if needed. On errors, on spikes, on exceptions, and we do have a good measurement of the intent modeling of the artificial intelligence engine performance. How long did it take? Well, from signing off the business case to the first go live, because of the complexity of the legacy systems, we had to choose a stage go live. So the first go live was 3 months after the business case sign off. So before even we did anything. So, and the final go live was 5 months after the business sign off. So within 5 months from getting the stakeholder approval in writing, we are fully live with the whole of our platform. So looking back, I don't even dare to think how long it will take us otherwise. Certainly not less than a year at best. Cost-wise, I estimate the platform costs are about 20%. I'm not exaggerating. 20% of what would have been otherwise, or 5 times better. Couldn't be happier. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Bogdan. That was a fantastic example of how, even with an advanced machine learning model, it's important to still have human input and to surface the insights of the machine learning model to human IT and business stakeholders. With that, we'll dive a bit deeper into other case studies as well. So Bogdan gave us a great story of how data and AI are being used to provide a better customer experience, while of course cutting costs within the business. What we'll do is give brief stories from our customers about the other 3 trends we highlighted. So you might recall the second trend that we had was hyper-personalization. And a great example of this is Glossier. Now, I don't know if, for those of you who haven't heard about Glossier, they are one of the fastest growing companies in the beauty industry. They are an e-commerce beauty retailer. They started out in the US a few years ago, and they launched in the UK and France this past year in 2018 and have been growing very rapidly. So they are a perfect example of a very successful e-commerce company that is doing things differently. They use Looker to analyze their different merchandising approaches, marketing, support, operations, and so on. Now, without going into detail into all of these use cases, Glossier have a great story of how they used their unified data analytics platform with Looker to really hyper-personalize their customer experience. And this is very important for an e-commerce retailer because a key advantage that brick and mortar retailers have is their shop floor, the shop staff that can really give a tailored personal experience to the customer. Right? The brick and mortar retailer is in control of the entire environment when a customer walks in, but an e-commerce retailer is not. And that was a challenge that Glossier, of course, faced. So what happened was that Glossier had a monthly report or weekly report that showed them sales, returns, different things like that. And one of their merchandising users, this was not a data analyst, this was a merchandising user, saw this report and observed that there was a big spike in returns over the previous week. And they weren't sure why, so they drilled into the data. And again, this was a business user, not an analyst. And they noticed that a very large proportion of that spike in returns, about 60–70% of them, was from one lipstick SKU. And they dived in a bit deeper, and they found that this SKU was always being returned for the same lipstick. So people weren't buying the lipstick, being unhappy with it, and getting a different lipstick. They were getting the same lipstick. Diving further into the data, they found that actually the buyers were returning it for the same lipstick but a slightly lighter shade. Now, I'm sure some of you can start to imagine what's going on here. But what this merchandising analyst did is then caught up with the product team, the team that maintains the website. And together they found that the lipstick on the Glossier website was being displayed as a lighter shade than it actually was in real life. And therefore they were able to have a very direct explanation to why so many people were returning this lipstick for a lighter one, and bearing in mind this product was released in the past week. Now, Glossier had spent a large sum in the sort of six figures fulfilling those returns. So now, instead of just fulfilling the returns, what they did instead before sending them through was attach a personalized note on my stationery saying, sorry, you got the lipstick you didn't want. We suspect that you wanted the lighter lipstick because it wasn't displayed correctly on the website, so please accept this with our apologies. And they tested this personalized card that they included in the return with a subset of the customers to whom they returned the lipstick. So notice that they're not giving any discounts away, they're not giving anything for free, but they're kind of really delivering a personalized experience where they're apologizing to the customer for what they did wrong before the customer even fed them back why they were unhappy with their experience. So kind of anticipating the customer complaints and addressing it proactively. And therefore, they were able to kill two birds with one stone by not only cutting the cost of returns and avoiding people returning that in the future, but also by noting a market increase in customer retention in that test cell to whom they sent a hyper-personalized message, again, without giving away any discounts or any huge cost. And so that is a great story of how Glossier, an e-commerce retailer, sort of took a lesson from the brick-and-mortar space to deliver a hyper-personalized experience to their customers using data. The third trend we mentioned was retail as a platform, i.e. retailers using their privileged relationship with their suppliers, with their distributors, with the other companies they work with to deliver another product to their core retail space and monetize that data to the other companies they work with. Two great examples of these are Farfetch, probably the most publicized retail IPO of 2018, and On AG, a Swiss e-commerce running shoe brand, trainer brand. And what they do, so a great example is Farfetch. So Farfetch, they are a luxury e-commerce retailer. The problem that they're trying to solve is that buying luxury brands, so here we're thinking the Gucci's, the Versace's, the Balenciagas of the world, is actually not a great process right now. There are only a very few retailers that carry them overall. Because these retailers often have a very expensive physical footprint, they have no choice but to mark up prices a lot. So the way Farfetch solves that problem is by providing an e-commerce platform, especially for luxury fashion brands. Now, what Farfetch noticed is that this means that they have a lot of pricing data, therefore, for those luxury brands. Those luxury brands are relatively low volume, so they don't have a lot of data on which to do pricing analysis. Farfetch provides the price points at which customers are most responsive back to those brands and allows those luxury brands to optimize their pricing strategy. And therefore, Farfetch, even though their main function is a retailer, they're using Looker to provide an analysis platform to the different luxury brands that they work with, so these luxury brands can optimize their pricing and therefore sort of diversify. And therefore, Farfetch is diversifying they're offering and using Looker to do so. And then the last trend that we've highlighted is data-driven supply chain optimization. And again, while this is not particularly new in 2018-19, having this done in real time has been an emerging trend of this past year. A great example of this is Tyco Retail Solutions. So they are a retail solutions company that was recently acquired by Johnson Controls. They work with many retailers, mainly in the brick and mortar space. The example we'll highlight here is in the apparel and running footwear space. Now, Tyco, in our case here, we are looking at a major footwear retailer for whom Tyco implemented RFID chips, both in their stock shipping pallets and on their individual products. Now, the data from these RFID tags get fed in real time into a database. And then they use Looker to surface that data and push it to the mobile phones of the shop floor staff. And therefore, what shop floor staff can do is optimize their cycle count, so they get an alert every time they should be doing a cycle count. So again, this hour-by-hour optimization of the supply chain. They get notified when certain products are out of stock, so they can order them proactively, or when some products are selling very well in other stores to encourage them to push those products to the customer. So again, having a unified data platform where they can drive in pretty much real time, or at least on a half-hour to an hour basis, the behavior of the shop staff to optimize their supply chain and even optimize their sales recommendations. And that wraps it up for the case studies. I'll now hand it off to Matt to take us through the Q&A. I've been hearing him typing on his computer, so it sounds like many questions have been coming through. So very excited to address these.
Perfect. Thanks, Cab. Yeah, there are a number of questions online. Guys, if you have any more, please do drop them into the chat window. We'll do our best to answer them in the next kind of 5-10 minutes. The first question actually is for Bogdan. Bogdan, if you had to do this project all over again, you know, what is the biggest lesson you've learned? I think what would you change in that process?
Well, people skills. Machine learning is new skills that don't exist really at present, not much though. So thinking forward of the people element, there are significant changes in skills and the type of approach that's needed to turn out a solution of this kind. So I would think about that as one of the first elements to get sorted. So that is one. The other one is the managing and operating model. That's also significantly different from a standard telephony or IT platform. So how to operate it, how to keep the lights on, that's always a question, but the way to do it is a little bit different than with standard IT platforms. So I would say this is also needs considering from the very beginning of the project, and also factoring into and shaping the operating and management model of the platform in parallel to development work and influence development too from that angle. That's what I can think of.
Perfect. Thank you very much. A great question came in early on. The question says, the effect of GDPR on retail personalized. Great question. I don't know, Cab, have you got any thoughts? I have a couple, but.
Yeah, so that is actually a great question. Actually, there is one fifth retail trend which we haven't highlighted here, and this came up, I think it was in Retail Week, which was data privacy as a brand differentiator, right? So I'm sure you've all been following the data breach scandals that have plagued 2018. the brands that are advertising how privacy conscious they are really the brands that are expected to do very well with their customers in 2019. Now, personalization in itself is not necessarily anti-data privacy, right? What really matters to customers, we found, or not we found, but that was illustrated in the retail trends, was making sure that you're not selling their data to other companies, even in an aggregated form. And you might have noticed when you were talking about the Farfetch example, where they were providing data to the different companies, they weren't providing any customer data, personal or not, aggregated or not. They were purely providing anonymized pricing data. So in this sense, I think that hyper-personalization and data privacy are not contradictory, as long as the company is making it extremely clear to their customers exactly how they're using their data and abiding by the fact that they are not using customer data to generate revenue with third parties.
Perfect. Thank you, Cap. Yeah, great answer. One more for you, Bogdan. What other tools did you look at from a kind of BI data analytics standpoint before you looked at Looker?
Well, we look at all the standard contact center reporting type of tools, coupled with IT specifics, so Genesis and then Power BI, for example, Wireshark and so on. So we realized that we're gonna need like at least 3 or 4 big applications with a heavy footprint, and then spending a lot of effort to connect the dots to get a 360 insight. So again, slow to change, big overhead to maintain, and costly.
Thank you. Okay, another question, back to product. I have a question about the differences between Tableau and Looker. What are the main differences? Yeah, I can take this one. So we're not here to bash any other tools. Tableau is a fantastic tool. I guess the key difference is in the use. So Tableau is a great visualization tool, right? It's designed to allow anybody, regardless of their technical skill, to go in and answer questions of data. And that data typically resides in spreadsheets or CSVs. Looker's goal is to be a data platform, right? And as part of that, Looker leverages the investment in modern data warehouses. So you have a single source of truth from a data aspect. And on top of that, Looker has what's called a modeling layer, where in that modeling layer you define and describe what your data means in a single place. So anyone accessing data through Looker uses those single definitions. So our goal is more around democratize data, but ensure governance and control in terms of those definitions and descriptions. I think Tableau is more, let's get my hands on data, let's ask my question quickly and move on. I think those are the two key differences. Okay, there's a technical question for you, Bogdan. What size of cluster or clusters do you use to undertake the ML and platform operations?
Yeah, so that's all in the cloud, so it's self-scalable and so on. It was a challenge for me coming from a old school background. I've been in the business 30 years, and so I was not used with being so remote from the systems, moving sliders and this and that, and immediately you have, double the power, double the capacity, and so back and so forth. So it's all in the cloud. We did not deploy any hardware, full stop.
Perfect. There was a follow-up question to that. So how do you manage the clusters with such peaky inbound activity? So Black Friday, Christmas, key trading periods.
Yeah. So it's self-scalable. So it really is. We consume the service. It's PaaS basically, except for machine learning. That's software as a service. We just logging in and we do configuration changes. That's complex configuration changes, but nothing else. Everything else on the telephony platform, on the data storage platform, that's all platform as a service, self-scalable. we do have to deploy in the cloud, but this is not hardware deployment. What it is, it's just allocating resources for our own use. So yes, I do have to do a little bit of calculations, but it's, as I said, it's self-scalable. So if in a week time we consume double, there's not a problem. It will give us double. We do have to ensure on the telephony side that our platform physically supports that. So we do have a pre-peak assessment with our vendors and get confirmation that they are able to support the level of traffic that we want them to support.
Perfect, thank you. And keep that one more. What was the customer engagement KPI? So how are you quantifying and measuring success in that regard?
It's a number of statistics. For example, repeat callers, repeat intents by caller, by destination, average duration of a call on the platform, i.e., is it very short? Is it too long? Is it looping around? So all these considerations. And then, of course, feedback from the store staff, feedback from the contact center agents, and also direct feedback from the customers.
Perfect. Thank you, Bogdan. Okay, guys, that's all the time we have for questions. We have one more slide for you.
Yeah. So we don't want this webinar, of course, to be the end of the questions. So we're going to be sharing this presentation, of course, and a recording of it with the slides. We've also included in these slides some links for you to learn more about how Looker works with retail. We also have some great customer stories there and some more detail around our platform. If you have any further questions about this webinar or about Looker in general, then please feel free to email discover@looker.com, and we'll be sure that someone gets back to you. Otherwise, thank you all very much. We've really had some great questions there, and we regret that we don't have more time to answer more of them. But you have a way to get in touch with us now. Thank you all.